Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another video with Swagglehos. And in this video, we have to talk... Ladies and gentlemen, do you guys ever get deja vu? You know, when you're doing a thing, and then all of a sudden you feel like you've been here before? I'm having a little bit of deja vu, I gotta tell you, because I've been doing this YouTube channel now for 3 years. And every January that rolls around, we always get sort of the same thing that happens where you get a Mandalorian season trailer released during a football game, and all of a sudden, everybody in the comic book market starts to get a little bit excited once again. So in this video, we got to talk about how you got to be aware of the pump and be very cautious moving into these next couple months. You know, we think about all the correlation between comic books, crypto, the stock market, all of that stuff. We're feeling a lot of pumps in those various markets. And I gotta think that this is a little bit of a dead cat bounce. So in this video, we're gonna talk about the Mandalorian season trailer. We're gonna talk about the Last of Us trailer. We're gonna talk about the effects on the market. And ultimately, we're gonna discuss that you may wanna pump the brakes a little bit if you're thinking about picking up any of these books. But before we get into the video, if you guys could drop me a like or a comment or subscribe if you're enjoying the content, helps support the channel doing those things, I'd appreciate it. But let us get into this video here today. Now, of course, the first thing we got to talk about is the Mandalorian Season 3 trailer. This is a trailer that dropped yesterday. And of course, like Mandalorian trailers do, you know, they always inspire a little bit of, you know, confidence in the Star Wars universe. They're, you know, cool trailers, fun show. Mandalorian, by and large, has probably been, you know, the best Star Wars property. I know a lot of people really liked Andor, but generally speaking, I think Mandalorian has been the biggest success as far as Disney Star Wars has been concerned. And, you know, from the trailer, we didn't really necessarily get anything too surprising. You know, we didn't get a Darth Inquisitor or something like that that caused a book in the market to pop off. But what we did see are a ton of Star Wars The Mandalorian #1s. Now, if you guys happen to know this book, Star Wars The Mandalorian #1 was the adaptation in comic book form of the show. And this was a book that was heavily printed. A lot of copies out there in the market, a lot of books being printed, a lot of variants that came out around that time. And this is a book that absolutely blew up, you know, over the course of these last 24 hours or so. A lot of sales for this book. I mean, it's so hard to keep track. I mean, there's so many different ratios, variants, all these different things, a lot of slabs, a lot of raw copies, different covers, things like that. But we saw a ton and ton of sales for this book overall, so much so to the tune that we actually got a record sale out of the 9.8 slab for cover A just yesterday, where we saw this thing sell for the $100 price point. I'll pull it up for you guys right here. Here in January, this is a book that actually has been trending up, and you can see in comparison to some of the other previous sales on the 15th, you had it at 55, 59, 46, 56, 40, et cetera, et cetera. Here in January 16th, we actually did get a $100 sale, which is higher than that of what the pre-launch sales for this thing were, you know, back in June of 2022, where this book was selling at the $85 range. Now, of course, $100 sale, not too big of a deal overall. It's not necessarily that people are going to get burned or people are going to lose a ton of equity on these books, but it is interesting to see that we actually started to get that. And like I've said in previous years, every time on this channel, every time this Star Wars show comes out, The Mandalorian comes out, the market gets a little bit excited. And then we start to get those, you know, Marvel properties, like we're going to get, you know, Ant-Man or Secret Invasion, things like that, and everything goes nuts. But, you know, we're still in this current market. We're still, you know, unsure of what is to come, you know, in the global economy, things like that. Obviously, you know, we can't really control comic book prices based on macroeconomic factors. But what I'm most interested to see is if you guys follow my series where I talk about, you know, the Silver and Bronze Age indexes. You know, I recently did the Copper Age one. You know, I'd like to see, you know, stability in those months for at least the next, you know, 3, 4, or 5 months to really make a determination of where we are in the market based on, you know, the bottom. If we're there, you know, maybe we're going to drop off even more. Of course, generally speaking, in the last year, we've been trending down. So there's nothing to suggest that we won't continue to do so. And I'm also not saying that it's not necessarily the time to buy. I think if you can find good deals, you can find good deals. I'm just talking about in an overall kind of macro view of where we are in the market. And it's interesting to think about, you know, some of these books that are really starting to move once again because of the excitement of the properties And, my overall warning to those people out there is that, this is still a time to be very, very cautious, to be very, very patient with these things. Because like I was saying, with these Star Wars Mandalorian books, there are a ton of copies out there. I realize not everyone has the ability to go to the LCS and pick up a copy. But, if we're talking about cover A right here, as recently as, a couple of weeks ago, I remember still seeing this book in my LCS. There are so many copies out there, like still on shelves. This was a massively printed book. And if The Mandalorian continues to be exciting, it'll be interesting to see if we start to get that FOMO starting to brew again. I know I made that video where I was being a little bit facetious about FOMO being dead, but it is interesting to see this. And I feel like every single year The Mandalorian starts this new craze and gets the comic market excited once again. Similarly, we have The Last of Us, which made its debut yesterday. And by and large, the reviews for the show have been overwhelmingly positive. And that has also created a little bit of a pump for this book right here, which if you guys don't know, The Last of Us #1 from Dark Horse 2013 was actually the adaptation of the video game series into comic book form. And this has also been an extremely popular book in the market in these last, week or so. We definitely had a lot of sales just coming off of the debut of last night's episode. In fact, we even got a 9.8 sale for this thing. Not quite the record price, but definitely really high, at least trending to that of what it was selling for, as recently as, 2020, 2021, 2022, etc. You can actually see from this graph that this is one of the books that actually has been trending up in the market due to the excitement of the show. And this is another one where you got to be really careful about this one. I'm not saying that the show isn't amazing. I'm not saying that the show won't be the greatest video game adaptation of all time and that this comic book won't be extremely valuable. In fact, I think the print run is very low for this particular book. So I do think that, you may be protected a little bit with the values of this thing. But what I do want to emphasize is something that I've emphasized before on this channel. And that is, it takes a while for these books to really, stabilize as bona fide keys in the market of pop culture. And the one I want to point to the most is The Boys #1 from 2006. Of course, the first issue in the Boys series, which is the comic book that started the adaptation of the very popular Amazon show. And look at the life cycle for this particular comic book here at the 9.8 grade. Initially, when we got the announcement for the show, it had a big spike up in 2016, jumping all the way to $314. But like things do after the news announcement of the show, it corrects all the way back down to the $89 range, which is, only slightly above what it was selling for before the announcement at $50. And then when we get to season 1, it has another spike up. It jumps higher than that of the announcement back to $389. And then after the season 1, it pulls back down to $224. Then similarly, season 2 pumps it up, drops off a little bit. Season 3 pumps it up again, and then it drops back off a little bit as well. So, this is the thing you have to think about with these, ebbs and flows of the market in terms of these shows. It certainly feels like The Last of Us could be a very successful show, but if you're somebody who is very determined to get your hands onto this book, you got to be careful of this little pump that's going on out there in the market. Wait till after season 1 if you're somebody who absolutely wants to have this in your collection. You'll probably be able to find it for a much better deal at that time. And then, hey, when we get to season 2 or season 3, et cetera, if the show becomes like, this cult classic that everyone is chasing in the market, then, you might be able to feel some of those gains and ride that wave for your book's value overall. Now, the other little book I wanted to talk about was one that, makes me smile. But again, this is one where I have to say, beware the pump of this one, is the current rumors of the Serpent Society being the villains of the next Captain America movie. Now, this one is very, very interesting. Obviously, just rumor right now, but you guys have heard me on the channel before talk about the Serpent Society. You guys know I love these characters. They were in Avengers Earth's Mightiest Heroes, which is why I have a fondness to them. But this book right here, Captain America 310, has definitely been one that is kind of lighting up the charts a little bit, definitely feeling up that pump out there in the market. I'm sure this will be on a lot of hot lists in the next, week or so. But this is an interesting book, but I would say, again, be careful with this one. This is one of those books where you can find this in back bins. I guarantee that you can find this in back bins. Now, buying it online for $14, not too big of a deal overall. You're never really going to get too burnt at that price point, but just beware that, this is one of those things that you're going to be able to find in bins for $5. And if in fact we get the Serpent Society, yes, maybe this will be a fun book to own, but generally speaking, I don't think that this is going to be a long-term value play by any stretch of the imagination. Who's to say that the Serpent Society is even going to be, in Captain America in any way more than that of, the Wrecking Crew was a part of She-Hulk, right? I mean, you're setting yourself up for disappointment. But, you know, if you do want a couple suggestions from my money, if I wanted to get a cool kind of Serpent Society adjacent book, I definitely would recommend Captain America number 110. This is the first appearance of Viper, otherwise known as Madam Hydra, not to be confused with the Contessa Madam Hydra, but the Viper Madam Hydra. And this is a classic Steranko cover. So even outside of this kind of spec around the Serpent Society, you know, you're buying a Silver Age book that has a lot of value just in terms of it being a classic Steranko cover. Similarly, you have Journey into Mystery number 98. This is the first appearance of Klaus Voorhees, the Human Cobra. At one point in time, he becomes the leader of the Serpent Society. You've probably seen his face a lot of times on Captain America comic books during the Copper Age. A very, you know, obscure sort of B, C tier villain, but a cool one all the same. And because this is an early Journey into Mystery book, I think that this is a cooler book to own than that of Captain America 310. But, you know, to each their own. You know, if you want these books, you know, go ahead and get them, you know, buy what you like, right? But those are just sort of my picks that I personally would get if I really wanted to have something that is adjacently cool to the Serpent Society. But before I wrap up the video, I did want to talk a little bit about, you know, pumping the brakes on this. You know, be careful out there. We're feeling this pump in a lot of the markets. You know, we had the S&P get a boost, you know, in this last week. We've had Bitcoin surprisingly get a huge pump. And a lot of that has to do with, you know, the factors at play where we had, you know, the CPI reports come out. It looks like inflation is on target to what people were expecting. I'm sure Papa Powell is going to reduce the amount of, you know, the interest rates going to only a 0.25% interest rate hike. And it's those correlations you have to look out for, because what happens is if it becomes predictable of what the Fed is ultimately going to do, then that's what the stock market likes. Like that's what, you know, asset people like, that's what investors like, is stability of any kind. If they can predict it, then we're going to feel those pumps. But that doesn't mean that we're out of this economic situation. It might still get very hard in the coming months, and we might still feel some of those pullbacks in prices, whether it be for those markets or it actually has a role in what we feel in comic books as well. So you got to be careful. Ultimately, buy what you like. You know, I've seen this movie before. I've read the screenplay before. Every single year in January, when we get these Mandalorian trailers, we get a little bit of this pump, and that kind of catapults the market into, you know, whatever tentpole movie we get, Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, Guardians of the Galaxy 3, and then after that, we've had those pullbacks. So, you know, you don't really know. We got to just, you know, stay calm, carry on, and, you know, enjoy our comic books. Anyways, that's all I've got for this video. Let me know what you guys think. What do you guys think about the Star Wars Mandalorian trailer? What did you guys think about the Serpent Society news? Did you guys watch The Last of Us? Drop me a like, comment, subscribe if you're enjoying the content, and I will see you in the next video.